which we use to represent the story. So I would briefly tell you the story that uh, in the in the city of Ahmedabad, when it starts gaining fame, slowly the tension rises, and due to which it leads to a war-like situation and mass destruction, leading people leaving the city, and city gets abandoned. Mm. And in the time which follows it, the Greens start taking over it. So, which becomes like an opportunity for people to then come back, because now the atmosphere of this city, the setup, the Greens taking over uh, the buildings, has created this landscape, which has become this opportunity for people to have a better life. Or also people had this reason of nostalgia, or sometimes a thrive to innovate new things in this context where the society has collapsed completely. So you have opportunities to create your own society and structure. Also, we created this transition of how the context has changed, and we had discussions about what would happen. For example, how the river would break and walk into the city, into the low-lying areas, or how people would start farming within the city, which used to happen in the periphery, which happens in the periphery currently. So this scenario is situated in the decade in say around 50 years in future. And yeah, this was the context that how we imagined it would be in that scenario. And in that scenario, my site was called Hazrat by Harry Stepwell. Um, Again, we went on detailing what the topography, how the topography would change, how the ecology would change over time, what new elements would form around, if the campus would still remain campus or the boundaries would blur, and how the Greens would walk again into the campus. So the campus features a stepwell, a mosque, and a tomb over here. And yeah, then once we did that discussions, we prepared drawings, a set of drawings showcasing the context of how it has changed. What is the situation with water? What is the situation with resources? What is the relationship between them? Is there abundance of that resource? Is there scarcity of that resource, which would eventually lead to taking a lot of design decisions while while making our interventions? And also the climate. Do the seasons has the seasons changed, or has the period prolongated as compared to the present climate conditions? And then coming up with a group of users, which all was again derived with the resources present. What would be, where would people find opportunity in those resources, and how would they use them, and what is the relationship between those user groups? What is the give and take between those user groups? And then we went on to selecting one user group each, for which my user group had to do with the water. So then I went on detailing out what the user group was, where I was imagining them to be a group of people who has came with this thrive to innovate, and also mark their position in this new society through innovating new things and using it for their own means of income and survival. um, so they are the people who has came and found this mutated plant, which they are using for creating a beverage which has health benefits. So then it becomes very popular among the other settled communities, and is like how we have trends these days that one would go behind and uh, something, and it is very popular. So that sort of drink that they are generating out of water, and that's why they decide to settle in the step well, where they have the main resource, which is water, which they use to produce the water itself and also to cultivate the plant which they have found. Um, Once done, Then we shifted to understanding what the site was and understanding its tangible and intangible aspects, what the atmosphere is like of the site, or how do you perceive the site, what are its physical aspects, what is the massing like, what is the uh, organization of the built form like, and then seeking opportunities of adapting to that site. So, how would you look at your intervention, exploring different ways of doing that? Is it intervention on top of the site, or is it an intervention within the site? And all in while, we were also how somebody asked in yesterday's session that how practical you are going in this process. So we were thinking about the relevance of the intervention that we were making. What is the capacity of the step well, or what is the quantity of water that is going to be there, and how much do you need to increase? So yes, it was not about the structural relevance, but more about the programmatic relevance of the architecture. And then exploring different diagrams and different relationships, we narrowed down to this one diagram, which was about how their intervention can become very mechanical process, which is happening, or which is an insert, like a machine, into the step well, which is processing this water and becoming a habitat for them itself. From there, then I shifted to understanding the opportunities of how to occupy, and in this matrix like existing structure, what can go where, which part of the matrix can be occupied for what functions, and exploring it in plans at different levels, what happens with the water. But also I realized that to do so I need to design the process of how the beverage is formed, because that was the base which was the deciding factor for what is required in this process, and how will it serve as a living space for the user group. And once that was finalized, it became the base, and then slowly the sections and plans started getting more defined, where you started having this mechanisms which became the places which can be occupied by them. And then through this process, one after a point, it became very rational drawing, maybe not the most refined one, but it was of a quality where it had uh, answers to why for each and every thing that we had intervened over here. And then we shifted on to creating the representation drawings and communicating the entire concept through drawings. In order to do so, I chose sectional perspective as the primary way of explaining the entire process, along with some ancillary drawings. And that's where a model helped me a lot, because it I could simply get line drawings or shadows in different layers and could overlay them and create a drawing in multiple layers. And this was the drawing which became the primary drawing, which showcased the process of how the water is used by them, how the water goes from being filtered, which acts like a shower for them, then how it is fetched from the step well to then the entire process of adding the flowers, adding uh, monitoring its pH levels and filtering, and then letting it settle for some time. So it became about the process was explained through these diagrams and this drawing. And along with that, this was the plan which showcased the relationship between the nature that exists and the intervention, which was very minimal, except for this pond which they have created. Nothing largely was visible to a person who's standing on top of the land. So to showcase that relationship, this plan helped. And these were some diagrams to showcase how and it occupies the shafts. It almost becomes like an annexure to the existing step well, and what is its relationship in the cross section, which is very narrow. So it is almost like uh, the existing floors were used for living spaces, and then this additions happens in the shafts. And if I could go back and explain, then on the topmost floor was the living space, which had very minimal sort of addition. And as you go down, the addition keeps on increasing, and the nature becomes more and more mechanical in that sorts. And this is where the living space is. Then on the floor below, it becomes a little more private, where the sleeping spaces, or where the reading spaces or meditation spaces are there. And then you go one more floor below, and then that's where they monitor the system. So it's again a bit more private. And then you go the bottommost, because here the idea was also to use the water as a way of enclosure, because the more and more you go deeper into the water, you start getting less visibility. So to use it to the benefit. So then you have the washrooms at the bottommost, and the um, living spaces at the topmost, which can be accessed by people. Um, and then these were some other diagrams showing the zoning of spaces, how these becomes the living spaces. That's where the circulation is, and these are the workspaces. And then at the end of the semester, we culminated the entire thing, entire project in a single sheet to explain it to a user. And yeah, that was.
Nisar, thank you so much. It was like wonderful presentation. Can you just do one favor? Can you just go to your cross section and just pan through the hierarchy that of water that you were talking about?
Sure.
Because the zoomed out didn't do justice.
This one.
Zoom the cross section. Maybe from the top you were saying the about the minimal intervention to the
Yeah.
one of the sections. Yeah, to pan it. Yeah.
So this is where the section is actually cutting through their living space on this floor, which in the long section you could see here. So it is cutting from here. Um, so this is that space which becomes like a living space, and it's open to the sky. And below it, you have the sleeping space. And then it can be accessed by this shaft into this laboratory kind of a space, which is also used for monitoring. And then this is the lift which they use, which is like a pressurized lift, which they use to go inside or dive into the water to monitor their machineries, which are submerged into the water once in a while. And at the bottommost, you have other machineries and tanks for sewage and things like that. So that was the hierarchy that we were trying to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Nisar. Diksha, do we want to do the Q&A one by one? Because we have three students all together. All, all right. Okay. Thank you, Nisar. Thank you so much. So up next, we have Datisha. Hello. You mute. Hi. Yes. So Datisha will be presenting the overpopulation scenario in Ahmedabad in future around 50 years from now, something like that, right? Is what I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Yes.
So our part was um, one where you imagine Ahmedabad as a really overpopulated lightscape sort of situation. So this is where we started with storyboarding, how and what are the things that would affect the life in the city, like how the emerging technology, infrastructure, and the ways of living would change in a condition like that. Um, and then, yeah, so this is what we imagine the life to be as a storyboard over there, where we look through one person's um, point of view of the city, how the character of the city is, how the life of getting food, rationing, all of that is, how you get through all the resources of shelter. And like this was through a point of view of a person who does not have a lot, who is not capitalized on the emerging monopoly of a market in the future. So that's more of a um, local user group sort of situation. So this is like the normal person's life at that point, where there's like infrastructurally there's a dual rail system, or just flyovers crossing over the city because there's so much of congestion and stuff like that, where um, the mills have smogged up the whole city, or there's just no space to live. And that's where your life is also converging with the rats and crows and dirt of the city. So that's like the feel of lightscape over here. And yeah, so this is how we imagine the city to transition in like 50 years on Google Map. And through this storyboarding and our research, we identified these user groups of pandemonium, where like there's laborers, there's mobile learners, or there's like it's people who take care of the sanitation or fire combatants, or when you're thinking about um, farming in that sense, where you're not getting food readily. So there's like tech harvesters, or um, due to congestion, you can't reach everywhere or something. So goods are obviously like right now also it's happening, but goods conveyors like, but it's just advanced version of that. And I think cooperative kitchens, you'll like cloud kitchens and stuff like that. What and further, when I move to my project, I'll move to goods conveyors or the drone operators. But let's keep to the site right now. Um, so, like these were the climatic conditions that are contrasting in the different zones of the city, and this is like a basic feel of how city would be in light scale. Uh, yeah, this is how we ideated the user group. And our site was specifically the Badra complex, the Badra Fort and Library Plaza region of Ahmedabad. This shows how the congestion and infrastructural development around the Badra Fort has taken over in like 50 years. Uh, yeah. So this is the side section that was imagined in 50 years, how the cityscape would be against the site. And yeah, this is the cross section. So like how that historical building has gone through the layers of degradation or just non-maintenance, and like no one cared about it. But now that it is something that is so centrally located in the city, and like, yeah, you just imagine that government has given it to you to repurpose it in some sort so that that space is not a waste, but is used for something fruitful in the future. Um, yeah, that's the plan. And how the night would be like. Um, Okay. So when we move to the user group I moved forward with, it's the goods conveyors or the drone operators. I've designed a housing for them over the Bhadra Fort library. So it started with like decoding what their routine would be, or what are the equipments or resources that they use that will inform the housing that will come along. Um, and our ideation started with going to the site and just looking around and seeing the opportunities of formal or functional approach, and ideating more in those sense. Um, so, like in the sketch over here, the bottom one, you're you're saying that it's about drones and the people who are operating them. So when the work and life is so integrated in that sense, how do you use the existing site and how do you build on top of it? So somewhere where that void is allowing the drone to come through and through into your space of living, and it goes down and docks itself or parks somewhere. And the ideas flowed along those lines. So there were a lot of uh, insane sketches also in this, but um, yeah, these are some explorations. And like some things that stuck here were the modular living. And because we're thinking about cohabitation in 2075, so somewhere where your individual space is not given that much importance, but somewhere where you are coming along with other people is that space where your life is. So that's like the retreat in your housing where you break away from your work. So those were the dualities that were being explored over there. And yeah, and from these, some criterias were taken, like the facade permeation and a central framework that allows through and through a void, and modular fitting, something that is extendable, stuff like that. And okay, so this was like the first initial ideation that was coming up, and it was just like an extendable framework and how the central part would be where people would come and the sides were where they lived. I think that remained constant, just the form of it started to evolve from something very um, thinking on terms of how structurally it would anchor itself on top of a really old building, so you can't really uh, put anything on top of it, but into the voids of the existing library over there. And then, yeah, like a structural form came from that itself, where like two voids are the anchors, and your building is starting to emerge from that. Um, More refinement, and I think this is where you focus more on the core, where living part really starts to contrast from your mundane um, work modules that are on the outside. So this structural framework also allowed for this double layered system, where you're saying that these are for drone operators. So these drones need to come and dock themselves, because this is where it's basically a drone operating headquarters also, but this is also where we are living. So the outer regimental layer becomes the docking station for these operators. And then there's like on the sides where you see there's like a double skin structure, right? So that becomes like a buffer zone because drones are docking over there. and then after that is where your living modules start. Um, and the core is basically a void that is continued from the existing Bhadrafort void. Um, yeah, and then so the core becomes like a living, organic place where people come from the peripheries to meet with other people. And when it's a void, so there's always like a cross connection from multi-floor layer. It's not just on that floor, but like across the floors. And this is where I started designating those cores, like where the central top part becomes an amphitheater core place, and on top of it becomes the spool area, which looks into the amphitheater through the big hole that punctures the facade of the building. And maybe like a mash deck in the center, or like terrariums across, and walkways that connect through and through. Things like that that give you a relief right out after you step out of your work zone or the living part that is on the outside. Um, so that was like the final iteration, which was model and which is finally the drone hive. I think it was named that because it's like all the drones come and flock on the outside and there's life inside. So it's more like the framework of a beehive, but drone hive. Um, yeah, that's that's it. This is a view where you show that how the interconnectedness of different layers through the central void is coming together. Um, and how it contrasts with the dim and the interior's tight space because there's no space in future.
Okay. Thank you so much, Latisha. It is refreshing to see the whole process again. It's been a really long time. It feels so. Like, thank you so much. We have the last one, Neil. Neil, yes, you can. You may present.
Hello. Is there a disturbance from my side or am I audible?
Sorry. Everything's good. Yeah, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay. So, hello everyone. Good evening. I'll start off with the project, the nautical nucleus, and it's situated in Matko. It's a speculative city which was earlier called as Jaipur. And yeah, so it started with in the year underground aquifer below the Aravallis. And as a result, there was a certain outbreak of the waters throughout the city of Jaipur, which led to the submergence of uh, ground floors of the city. So this was in the year, what is it, 2050. And as a result, because the water stayed and persisted throughout as the years uh, passed, so the residents had to adapt to the like the scenario which was there. The ecologies also faced changes in the morphology, even the seasons, the humidity, and how the way the people started to build around it, how the way the plants started to grow, introduction of hydroponic, what do you say, cultivation, flowers, different seasons, even the way the stones dealt and how the stones aged with the presence of water. So this was the overall uh, what do we say scenario which was happening in the city of Jaipur, which was then called what do we say Matko. And as a result, stated earlier that like as what do we say, all the commercial shops of the city were submerged because they were at the bottom. So what the people had done was that most of the commerces were shifted at the higher levels, and this also led to the building of scaffoldings and like the way like buildings started to be built on as stacked sort of systems, as also observed over here. And all the heritage monuments which were there, they were looked in a different way, and habitation was used as a solution to preserve the heritage monuments. So we have the Jantar Mantar, we have the Hawa Mahal. So, and so they were used and they were viewed as a way to use it as a habitants for the residents and for the people. And so this was an aerial view of the Hawa Mahal in Matko in the year uh, 2050 after the flood occurred and after years were passed and the situation stabilized and the water stayed throughout. And this view is an exo which shows uh, how how different materials were used like bamboos, steels, and modern constructions, modern vehicles, but yet in a dialogue with the existing stone buildings, heritage buildings throughout the city, and how the idea of building on the stone structures and building on the existing and lightweight building and different modes of delivery, transport, because the ground was technically gone, it was submerged. And this was Hawa Mahal, how there were different ecosystem was formed throughout the city. So there were different algae, different weeds. So one issue was happening throughout the city, which was that so because of the submergence of the city, there was an overgrowth of the algae in all the streets of the city, which led to various waterborne diseases, various outbursts of algae and foul odors throughout the city. So in order to deal with the scenario, there were various occupations which were introduced by the people. So like we have the scientists who study the hydroponics. We have uh, we have the aquasavans, which are the fishermen that which use the fishes to clean the algae throughout the streets of Matko. We have the boat makers, which use the modern know-hows in the 2050s, which make different modes of what do we say commutes. We have scrap. So we have people which use the scraps and make stuff out of it. So these are various uh, occupations which were introduced because of the scenario where people adapted to the existing conditions of the city. And so what my user group were the aqua savants. So basically, because of the outgrowth, there were a group of researchers which which came forward to deal with the outgrowth of algae in a more eco-friendly way, so that harm they don't harm the what do we say the ecosystem which was just being formed because of the flood, and they don't harm the fragile ecosystem which was being formed. And so after doing some research, they found out that mollies and catfishes are one of the species which feed on the algae and which can also survive in different types of waters, may it be slightly like brackish salt water the as well as the normal distinct fresh waters. And they were interested in using what do we say modern know-hows and modern all technologies. They were interested in group fishings, in hydroponic, plantings and cultivations. And so this was how the new user group was introduced in the city, which were mainly called the Aqua Sevens, which used to scrub on the algae in the streets of Matko using mollies and catfishes. So these were the vehicles which they used to take throughout the streets. These were like the tanks which used to go on the streets to scrub the fishes. The fishes were like discharged and they used to eat the algae and clean the cities and maintain the ecosystem. So moving on towards the intervention. So the idea was, like I stated earlier, habitation was the solution for the preservation of the heritage monuments. Hawa Mahal was looked at as in a different way in order to uh, survive and adapt in the new scenario. And because of the location of the Hawa Mahal in the center of the city, it was chosen by the Aqua Sevens to have the habitat over there. And so, because of the height of the Hawa Mahal and because of the location, the idea was that the residence or the habitat can be at the higher level so that it can capture the breeze and the wind in the city because of the humidity of the site, and the reservoirs of the water for the fishes could be at the bottom level, which could use the existing water in the city. So there were different ideas made. So these were the initial explorations which were worked on. Uh, which worked on the connections of the water to the habitats and the connection and the relations of the how the residents would
Neil, your voice is.
the reservoirs,
Hello.
what were the connections with the
Yeah.
Hello, yeah, man.
Yeah. Now you're audible. Yeah. Your voice broke, but you can continue. Yeah.
So these were explorations where what do we say, the habitats that had different. So this was another example how different scaffolding was used as a medium for the residences to sort of plug in and juxtapose inside an existing framework where like all the filtrations and the water tanks were at the below and the residences were at the higher level so that they could also capture the wind. And overall explorations had a certain level of, what do we say, porosity, which would allow the wind to flow through, which is also one of the characteristics of the Hawa Mahal facade, where Venturi principle is used in order to trap the wind, in order to accentuate the flow of the breeze. So moving on further, the idea of, what do we say, a courtyard was introduced in the middle. So this was because overall in the city, so there was an absence of the ground. And because the main occupation of the Aqua Sevens revolved around floating on water most of the time, there was an idea that if they could experience ground in the habitat, it would be like nostalgic, what do we say, feeling for them, and also a relief for them as they reached the habitat. And so there was a courtyard, which was again, so there were like various explorations based on the angles of the winter sun and how the residences, the habitats could just revolve around the courtyards, which could like respond to the void which is being formed, and how they could have different visual sort of connections with the courtyards. So these were like some explorations, and also how the filtration systems would intervene in the existing stone arches and the colonnades of the Hawa Mahal. And then there were again explorations in the models where the existing walls were used as a base or as a dictating grid, and how so various ideas were worked on the connections of the habitats to the reservoirs. So what do we say? Some were bridges or legs which connected. Then also the how the habitats are placed and what is the relation with the void. Is it hovering around? Uh, is it, what do we say, shaping the courtyard in a way? And as well, what was the role of the structure? Like here, the grids of the colonnades were used as the grids which dictated the scaffoldings, and then the horizontals were based on the levels of the existing uh, slabs of the Hawa Mahal. So this was one exploration, and then there were various exploration based on the nature of the courtyard and other things. So moving on to the development of the plan. So as the idea was to have a certain level of porosity in the habitats and also to have a connection with the central port. All the habitats were viewed uh, as shells which were oriented and rotated in a way that where they could have visual connections with the courtyard. And as so there was a nature of the families which pertained in Jaipur, that like there were usually joint families, or like families of, what do we say, 6, 5 or so. So even the habitats reflected clustered, where like there could be different spaces for one whole of a family, whereas this whole could also behave like a community. And hence there were decks which connected all the smaller habitats, which would also serve as spaces for community interactions. Whereas the shells could be a space where they could experience their isolation and where they could also contemplate in a way after a hectic routine throughout the day of scrubbing through the streets. And there was again the circulation was worked out in a way that from the bottom there could be a ramp where one could experience the tree which was in the center, and then one could experience and reach above in the zone of residences. And this was the plan at the bottom where the reservoirs where the fishes were bred, they shaped the dry ground or the courtyard, where again these ducts were given to access all the pipelines and the shafts. And this was a space where the vehicles were supposed to get docked, again based on the existing wall grids which was there on the site on the Hawa Mahal. And then the corridor or the bridge at the center was used as a space where they could house all the filtration and all the technical stuff and systems. So, like the tanks were studied, existing aquariums was studied, and based on the requirements and based on the number of uh, what do we say, systems which the water has to go through, uh, these were designed. And they used the existing water which was there in the larger courtyard and in a way throughout the city. And this was again the courtyard at the center. And then in order to work on the connection, so because again in a larger way, this the city also experiences monsoons as well as summer. So the water level isn't like a consistent water. It fluctuates throughout. So in order to deal with the fluctuation, the idea was to work out to an entrance in a way that it also deals with water when it is lower in summer, as well as when it is higher in the monsoon, so that the functional and the programmatic use isn't hindered, and also to work out with the language of overall intervention. And then again to get a connection with the sky. And so initially the idea was to capture the sun when one enters, but slowly the void was shaped in order to capture the jarukhas and the chhatris at the top of the facade. And then how each of the shells, the habitats, they had a connection with either the courtyard or the with the Hawa Mahal, the jarukhas and the chhatris, and how the ramp revolved around the tree, so that when you are actually climbing, you experience the reservoirs. You're almost in a land of what do you say, catfishes, in a world of fishes. Still, you descend into the habitat zone where it's almost in between the shells and between the planters which are there. So this was sort of the final detailed draft which was worked on, where there were different ways of connections and how the datums were based on again the levels of the Hawa Mahal. And there was an existing lattice. No, there was a lattice which was designed in which the shells intervened and how the shells had different openings and connections with the courtyard, and how the openings were shaped in a way that rainwater doesn't enter inside. So the cutouts were located in a way that rainwater doesn't enter inside. And if you look from the bottom, all of the shells had a porosity and the decks were floating in a way. Or we can say they were separated in a way from the main structure of the shell, so that the cross ventilation of the wind is like not only outside in the community spaces, but also inside through the shells. Like it can be observed in all the spaces. And it was mainly sort of a ferrocrete structure where bamboo was used instead of reinforcements based on the existing materials of the site, and thin layer of maybe speculative material similar to concrete was used in order to attain the shells. And this structure was supported on the lattice, which was an anchor on the ground. And then these were again the filtration systems and the courtyard, and a planter which could house a tree which could grow and thrive in the community ground. So this was a diagram which showed how initially water was throughout the Hawa Mahal, how the retaining walls were added to retain the ground at the center, how the void of the courtyard was shaped according to the angle of the sun for the community, and how slowly the shells, the residences, the habitats were placed around the void, uh, around the courtyard with a certain level of porosity for the wind to flow. And then again, how the two major cutouts, which was the entrance and the view to the Hawa Mahal Jarukas, was shaped in a way to not only capture the sun, but also the frame of the Jarukas. And slowly, the smaller cutouts in the habitats were worked down. Uh, Smaller cutouts like the connections, the tunnels between the shells, the cutouts for the rain to be avoided, and then the largest structural lattice was added to support. These were the life in the shells, which was viewed like how in the year 2050 there would be a different medium of, instead of what do we say, projectors, the VRs would be used, holographs would be used, and how again one doesn't need all the storage and like all those furniture in the future. Maybe the spaces below the floorboards could be used as storage, and so you get a clean, like seamless spaces. How the windows were there, which once open allows the breeze to flow through. How these had connections with the courtyards. How like the tunnels were there to connect the larger, what do we say, like one family with, and the interaction with all the community spaces. They could perform the uh, hydroponic farming and the cultivations from below, and how the voids in between the shells were used as spaces, or like similar to caves or like fun activities. It could be performed in these voids. And at the entrance, how the vehicles were, like how the street which connected the entrance was a busy street where most of the hydroponic most of these vehicles were parked for the aqua savings at the Hawa Mahal, and these like two floorboards are there to access again uh, monsoon and summer. And then again, uh, this community ground is a very active ground with all the machines and the mechanics in the bridge, and the ramp which experiences the world of fishes with the ground where they can have all the activities, community activities. So this was the main drawing of the, like we could say it is the main design. It is drawing which explains the main intervention and the main, what do you say, purpose of the intervention, where it shows the life, like different variations of life and activities happening in the nautical nucleus, where, as explained earlier, how the You get different views and connections of the courtyard, a connection to the Jarukhas of the Hawa Mahal, to the sky, to the ground, a ramp which experiences the world of fishes, and then like different nature of spaces in between the shells, inside the shells, in between the structures, decks, community spaces were formed. So this was the plan at the bottom where, as stated earlier, how the filtration systems were worked out and how the ground was worked out, with also also adhering to the reservoirs, the different sizes of reservoirs based on the cycles of the fishes from fisherlings to the larger fishes to the ones which could be directly used for transport and for scrubbing. So this was a plan at the high level, which was cut through one of the top layers, which showed how the decks in a way connected the shells, and there was a contrast of the inner isolated space and the community decks which was there, and how there were different nature of spaces being formed between the lattice, the decks, and the cave-like shells. So this view showed the way in which the interventions set in the Hawa Mahal
Neil,
and what's
can
the
you go a
relation
little
with
quicker?
overall
Neil,
site.
Neil, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you just run it a little bit? Just
Hello, am I
go through
audible?
the images. Yeah, just quickly.
Yeah.
So we can start. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. So this was the activities inside the interventions between the shells and inside. At night, the material was produced supposed to glow so that all the community spaces could get lit and all jammings and different activities could be performed. This was an exo which showed the structures, inner structure of the shells and the ferrocrete or the speculative material. And this was the model which was made to visualize and to imagine the final spaces, the shells, and the shells with in relation with the structure and the data is how it sat on the coat of our mail. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for a
Should I
very
stop sharing?
explicit. Yes, yes. Yes, you can. Thank you so much, Neil, for elaborate and a very intriguing presentation. Yeah, over to both of you, Diksha and Harsh, and I think Ritisha and Nisar can be available. So yeah, I think we can open it to the other students and audience for them to ask, comment, discuss if they want to. Feel free to discuss or ask any questions.
Absolutely, ma'am. Yes. You can use chat box and yeah. How did Diksha continue?
Any one of you can shoot, and if you can add, I'm sure, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, don't say everything, okay? Like, don't say everything was difficult. Go ahead, please. Yeah, just unmute and speak up. Yeah.
I think just even the start of the thing, like designing the city itself in a way, because um, you don't know till where you can expand imagination. Like till where is it possible for the city to be how you imagine? Like there's always this question where you're thinking, will it be like this am I doing it right? Is it wrong? What is the calculation basis for like in 50 years it will be like this or that? So I think even the initial stage itself is the most experimental part that made for the basis of the project.
Neil, you wanted to
Yeah,
add
I
something?
guess even in the designing part, I guess the initial ones, because it's almost open-ended for us to experiment all the different ways. And it's not like none of them is wrong. Each of them works out in a different way and also caters to the speculative, what do you say, the city which we have built. So in order to choose which one would do more of a justice, and then also looking at the different parameters of the speculative this side, I guess that is the most experimentative and the most iterative way, or iterative in a way part of the design.
Rida, you want to ask something?
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, yeah. Am I audible?
We just wanted to check that. Rita, you can go ahead with your question. We can hear you well. No, no, no. There's no time, voice lag, maybe, but we can hear you. So you can just speak. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just repeat my question. I was asking if we have a concept, we have a lot of concepts in our mind, but we don't know
Rita, you're muted. You, I think, press the mute. I think we are very away from the COVID times where we were all used to this medium. So, yeah, it takes a moment, I think, to get back to this medium, like of online sessions. I think she got muted. She didn't realize. Yeah, we can go ahead with that. And maybe Rida maybe can also write in a question. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. What's the question?
Should answer if okay. So mainly for the washrooms part, all the ducts and the pipes were taken through the lattice. So if you look, the lattice were not just a single member of bamboo, it was a column system where there were, what do you say, four bamboo members, and it was hollow in the middle. Also to serve as a stronger hollow structure, but also to house all the pipes which could not only carry the washroom ducts, but also which could provide water for the hydroponic planters which are there at the above, and also the waste of the fishes could be used. So all those ducts were there in that 150 space in between the columns and the beams. And for the space, the shells were flexible enough to like just add the partitions for the washrooms to define zones and areas.
Yeah. I hope that answers your question. What was the name of the student? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Neil.
I think the final concept that we agreed upon was from a lot of concepts that we explored, and just choosing one or two strings from each of them, or things that were coinciding with each other that made sense. And I think that was a addition of a concept rather than one concept that we finalized on. Uh, and I mean, yeah, you always have more and more ideas as you progress. Also, when it's also realistic to just stick to one, so you can at least clear out one of those 100 things that you have in that.
I am sure it was different for different one. Nisarg, do you remember what was
Um,
the take on the iterations? Yeah.
I mean, to a certain extent, I agree with Disha that it started with very high enthusiastic, large scale interventions, but slowly it narrowed down. And it's also about answering. For example, I was not very consciously or very actively answering this question, but somewhere in mind, it was there that what sorts of intervention do I want to put in on the site, as if I was a user group, what sorts of presence I want to create in the community, because somewhere where we are looking at the societal collapse, we are trying to reimagine it. Where do I want to locate this? And also the other aspects. For example, you were talking about how the land has been occupied by the ecology. So do we want to disturb it or do we not want to disturb it? So eventually answering all those questions and then coming up with a combination of multiple interventions, because the initial ideas are very open in the air. You just want to explore the possibilities that are there. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope, Rida, you're satisfied with the answer. If you can ask if there is any follow-up question, though. And also, what was the softwares? Okay, there is another follow-up question. What was the softwares used for this graphics? Also, like how were the small concept graphics developed? Like in one of them, there were different users. How was that graphic made? Hmm? Which maybe the user profile one? Is she pointing on that? I mean, yeah, you guys pitch in.
Yeah, we largely used Photoshop and Procreate or Sketchbook for renderings. And at that point, we used AI to a very limited extent, where I think Ritisha showed one of the collage, which was completely made with AI, but rest of it was used using our um, works or either borrowing it from somewhere, from sources, and making a collage out of it. But yeah, largely Photoshops and SketchUp or Rhino, based on the nature of your
Yeah,
intervention.
for Lightscape, yeah, the user profile was AI, but I think in yours, this side, it was completely made by your,
Yeah, yeah,
like they
It was
imagined every part
sketch.
of.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I think for the user profile, I'll just add one thing. It was just largely to say that, okay, not everyone, like, has a, like, a hand on sketching anthropology or anthropographic postures. So I think we made sense out of using tools which are faster. So if someone can use that over, someone can use over their skill of hand. So there was a mixed media largely when it came to scenario making. So it was like a mix of the best skills that the group mates have in a way.
There was 16 weeks.
It's 15 weeks with the exhibition. It's already you are into one, so it's the same number of weeks. 15 weeks, so yeah, maximum like 4 weeks, like 4 months. And was a monsoon semester, right? I think no.
Shorter semester.
So it had a Diwali break, if we say so, and some festivities. Yes, yeah. Today, people will ask more, unmute and ask. People are writing more today. I was like,
Excuse me. Yes, sorry to interrupt. Hiranya, I asked a few questions in the last lecture. I would like to ask a couple of more. So basically, when designing with overpopulation or underpopulation, uh, when civilization starts to emerge again and they start to again like organize itself, there will be like, for example, in overpopulation, at the start of it, there will be like due to the scarcity of resources, there will be hostile nature of a lot of people. So was that considered when distributing, like when showing users, or was that considered when designing, or was that not considered?
When you were talking, yeah, it was considered. I mean, when you're seeing that there's lack of space and all of that, when you're going vertical, I think you're considering the sheer lack of space as a resource, and how you're making the most out of that uh, footing that you're getting, like the foothold. So that is there. That's one aspect because we're dealing with space in architecture. So if I were to design a lot more and it was a system design based thing, then it can expand in that sense. But as a scenario, we had based it out how the city was functioning and how there was resource scarcity and why these user groups were also there. Because this is just one where I'm presenting about the drone operators, but there's others also like farmers and stuff like that where they're catering to those lack of resources. So if you see, I'm not sure if yesterday it, did you show?
There was a glimpse of, say, for example, Soham's project of the community kitchen, where everything now happens like a community kitchen. There's not, everyone doesn't have a resource of a kitchen, and farming happens in a communal way. There were quick glimpses, but yeah, they might have, because there was a combination of all the three studio iterations, so they might not click, like, because of the variations that they were there. But yeah.
So yeah, basically in overpopulation, I mean, even the user groups emerged from that basis. Like there is a lack of resource. So yeah, on that.
Yes. Yes. Hiranya, I hope that answers.
Yes, that does answer it. And by resources, I not only meant space, but also money. Because when building upwards, even then the vertical space would still be counted as like it needs to be either purchased by the user group, or so even then when they would be building it, it would be used by materials that were more easily available and less costly because, well, there's like scarcity of resources.
I think
So
there is
even
not a scarcity of money. There is just a huge diversity of how it is distributed, where some people have the monopoly of capital and some just do not have anything. So
yes,
these
yes,
people are
exactly.
basically employed by those capital powers. So the capital powers can still build and employ people. So I think that does answer the money aspect.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
I want to ask one thing. In the Neil's project in Jaipur, so the entire the each student get a different project or a group of students work on the when Neil was presenting, he specifically said he is working on the that particular person related to the algae. So yeah, how is the students work?
Neil, would you answer that? Or yeah.
Yeah. So mainly we had a group for the scenario making and the city making, the speculative of the city, but we had choose individual users based on our interest, and then we had led the interventions and the in the workspaces individually. So that was how we had taken our own stances in the like in the later part of design.
Hush, does it give any clarity? So it's the projects that you see
Yeah.
is individual till the larger ecosystem design is there or the world building is there. It's group, and the group is maximum of 4 people, maximum 4 to 5, and then it's largely the design proposals are purely individual. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Swamiya's question. Yeah, it's a question to Nishak. Nishak mentioned about mechanical process of water management. Maybe she wants to know more about this. Yeah, she said it included stuff like pH monitoring and stuff. So, and can you elaborate more? Yeah, can.
Um, okay, so at that point, we didn't go beyond just mentioning it. Of course, yes, but like I researched onto the process that, okay, pH is an important part of such sort of a process. I looked at various case studies or various methods where similar processes were used to create something else, and borrowed from different processes and created a very hypothetical process. So it was not an important part, but it was a part which kind of helped me decide the nature of the build space. So, for example, I'm dealing with pH or uh, adding processes or chemical or testing the water. Then I would need a laboratory kind of a workspace for them. That's where it helped. So that's why it was important to mention that it is that part of the process. Um, at this point, um, it's really
2 years. After 2 years, he would
yeah.
not. But what I remember of was he actually studied a lot of water movements, a lot of ancient say Greek filtration system of sedimentation. Yeah, also little offbeat references like there's this artist who does make filter coffee machines out of glass.
Yeah.
So things like that. So it is, as he said very correctly, it was a combination where water was involved in various systems or machineries or engineering. That is what was referred, and part of each system was referred and then tried to curate a new one in a way. So that's what even I can recall. I don't know, sir, do you?
Even I referred to breweries and how
Yes,
they
distilleries. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more question I want to ask. In the Tisha presentation, there is a lot of experimentation and lot of uh, concept sketches on the section, particularly on the section. So I think there are more students in the third year and second year. So in our scenarios, the section would be the last. Matlab, we have to ultimately produce section. There is a list key. We have to give one plant, two sections, four elevations, and the list is there. So, but I can see in the Tisha's presentation, the sections are used as a medium to create a habitable space, and even in Neil's presentation, the sections to create a way for the light and to deal with the levels of fluctuation. But yeah, so I want to would you like to give some guide on how the students can use sections in the
Ye-
early, because
Yeah,
it's a
I
very
mean,
toughest part also to make a section, I think.
I mean, I don't. I mean, when you're designing anybody, you are parallelly imagining plan and section. Maybe you're not drawing them. And in my case, particularly because the building or the site itself was a volume which was very narrow and stacked up at multiple floors, it was important to establish the vertical relationship rather than looking at it in the plan. And how do you occupy those different levels? How do you make them interact? And yeah, it was not challenging, rather it was very helpful to use the section. And yes, I of course parallelly was maybe not making very detailed plans, but I was checking the feasibility of what I was trying to do, if it is possible to do that in plan as well, maybe with a very sketchy plan or something like that. So it was not very independent, and it can never be independent that you are doing it in just plan or just section, unless you are talking about massing or something. So yeah, but I mean, if you want to look at it, then you would find a studio on our college website, which was completely on how do you use section as your guiding process. It was called the Vertical Cut, where they designed their entire thing using section as a medium. So, yeah.
Thank you. One more question regarding the final layout of the sheet, the color scheme. How you guys decide which color scheme should fit, and yeah, that's a well, which color should be for the people, which color in the Tisha's presentation, the structure which having drone stacking and all that stuff. So yeah, how did you guys approach the color scheme for the final presentation?
Um, in my case, it was pretty clear that one, that the drawing was very detailed and very texture heavy, since it was very mechanical sorts of objects placed there. So adding more colors to it would not help communicate it better. So keeping the larger drawing black and white, and then just showcasing water in its colors, where the water is in its untreated form, and then how it is treated, and slowly it's changing its color, was the larger idea. And since the the pink color basically came from the flower that was pink, and then it is making the water pink. But that's how the color scheme came, at least in my case.
Yeah, for mostly all of them, the color scheme comes from something that was there in our concept itself, like his pink flowers to water, something like that. And for me, I think mainly it was about the contrast of living and work. So when you're thinking of living as a lively part of their routine and work as a mundane thing, it's where the cool and warm color scheme, that contrast came in. And I mean, the details of it come from experimentation, but largely, yes.
Yes, another. I want to ask one thing. You guys are already dealing with some organic shapes or some out of the way things. So how did you model 3D model it? Matlab, it's a very tricky thing, huh?
Yeah, it was a bit of a struggle to model that, but took time, but yeah, it happened on
Yeah, I mean, it took time and
time.
patience. You'll come, like, the first iteration that you'll make won't be the best one, but then you'll slowly learn how to improve it, and then you'll give your final shot. And once you start making, you'll if you look at it in the first glance, you feel like a lot of things is happening, but once you're making it, you're doing it one by one, and you're just tackling one problem at a time in the model, that you want to model this part. So this is the issue, and how do I model it? Then you go to the next. So when you're doing it, it's not that difficult to do it.
So you guys were using some advanced like Rhino or something, or
No, I was using SketchUp. My entire model was done with SketchUp.
I modeled on brand.
Mine was mainly, I guess, Rhino and couple of Grasshopper scripts.
yeah, that's because the competition feel is there.
So Harsh, it's very interesting that our process is largely analog, like where we ideate through like a very conventional mediums that a student intuitively is comfortable with, because it's important as a studio that we vouch more on their intuition, which comes from their comfort of the skill in a way. Rather than imposing a software, the software also is decided based on what is the form or what are they now expecting to formalize. So, as in Neil's case, it is easier to sometimes do a little grasshopper script because there is some repetition or a pattern of a certain kind. Wherein terms of Nisar, there are some pure geometries as well. So it could be like a path to whole, or really how you construct a building and do like assemble parts. So SketchUp would also do. So depending on the complexity, like with Ditisha, I think the members or the structure itself, the outer shell was a challenge. But yeah, I think the Rhino would do justice because it was still geometrical but fused. Design showed Ditisha. Sorry, there is some question. The design showed by the Tisha, one with central amphitheaters. Oh, is beautiful rendered. Was wondering how to achieve that type of result through the software. Through then there is no choice. Sorry, Ditisha, you can go.
Um, uh, I mean, it's Photoshop. I don't know what else to say.
You can talk about the mishap also. There are mishaps. Everything is not. I mean, now they are smiling because they're out of it, but there are some mishaps which happens. There are some bad days of software or laptop which occurs. Some peaks happen. Yeah, I think it's not always a happy life. Yeah.
I think this heavy file, it's always that you can just lose it one night. I think one of our classmates just saved it in some other name and lost his own section on. Yeah, I think I also lost a game like that. When I mean, the render basically the software is purely Photoshop. It's nothing else. It's just a heavy layering in Photoshop. But man, is that you did the hand painted also, right?
Yeah, in Manchuri, the pink color was not exporting, and somehow the file was crashing. So I had to print the rest of it as it is, and then just paint it over.
If people wouldn't have captured it, we would have never known. It is like that. So yeah. Yes, Harsh. I anything else? I think
Yeah, I think it's we have completed a lot, and
yeah.
Diksha, over to you.